Looks good, doesn't it, that?
I love that theme tune.
Do you know we can't monetize the videos because we use that theme tune, and
I
I mean, so few people
don't think
watch
we get
it.
enough viewers to really worry about that, do we?
No, we don't. I think the channel as a whole earned something like £1.20 last week, and there still hasn't been a payout. So yeah, it's not about the money; it's about the fun. And this week on the Stacey West EFL Fantasy Football League show, game week 7/8. That sounds like Game of Thrones, doesn't it? The first of his name, King of the Andes. Uh, but King of the show, refresh me, Mr. Lemming.
Yes, congratulations are in order, aren't they? I would say it's your first legitimate win.
Well, I wouldn't because I had a moral victory one week, if you remember. So technically, I'm 3-2 up now. But
But you're
and
not.
I won I won the first 2 weeks as well because you didn't play. So
Well, we didn't even have this idea before the first 2 weeks, so I don't think we can give you points before we started recording scores, and we didn't even have the idea. So it is, of course, though, from being 3-0 up to myself, it is now 3-2. 2 wins on the bounce for Mr. Hutchinson. I've had better weeks. I certainly have had better weeks. I didn't enjoy it. I didn't enjoy everyone else, particularly you being smug and me not being. That's definitely not as fun as it is the other way around.
So, shall we have a look at? We'll start with the losing team this week, which was Substandard Liège, and just we'll bring those up and just have a quick look. What particularly do you think let you down here?
Well, Huddersfield Town, hugely.
Yeah,
2 losses, an own goal from Mr. Hellick as well, didn't help. But yeah, 2 winnable games on paper. Thought Huddersfield could pick us up plenty of points, but the actual selection of Huddersfield Town picking up 0 points, Hellick only getting 2, and Karoma coming up with 7. Thankfully, to get some benefit from picking a Huddersfield player, but yeah, really quite let down by Huddersfield Town. Coventry, of course, losing. Had you right, having a poor performance as well. And then Tom Fellows, person with the most assists so far in the Championship this season, hasn't really got close to an assist for the last 2 or 3 weeks now, despite having quite a few points for that, and actually having a high expected assists. But you know, the early season is so volatile, isn't it? To see kind of patterns, and the patterns that I had kind of subscribed to, other than Peterborough selecting Mr. Poku there as my captain, kind of saved me from actually quite an embarrassingly poor week. So, yeah, I wasn't very happy, to be honest with you.
We'll look at the league table in a minute. I think you're being harsh on yourself because you're saying poor week. It was 75 points, which I think is your best game week. And actually, although it was a double game week for some teams, I mean, I'm trying to be nice now, magnanimous winner and all that. You weren't the only one to pick Huddersfield and Peterborough. In fact, I think 4 of the top 5 in this game week picked both of those teams. And so we'll have a quick look. Dean, who was on the show last week, obviously he picked Huddersfield and Peterborough, so it was an easy trap to go down. Sometimes you have to think outside the box, as we'll look at when we look at my team, of course. So that was Dean's team. Now, for somebody that could only pick players with 1%, that 1% of the rest of the people have got, he had quite a good week, didn't he? We enjoyed having him on last week.
Oh, it was brilliant to have Dean on. Yeah, really insightful. Just really interested to see how he kind of picked his team. For him, it's a self-imposed rule, but I think it's a really, really clever rule. A couple of players that perform really well for him in that week there will now be unable to be picked because more people will be picking them this week. But he actually got exactly the same number of points as I did, and he was only allowed to pick players that less than 1% of the overall player base had selected. So I think that is pretty damn impressive to get 75 points off that. So yeah, credit to Dino. Many things for me, particularly, to learn going forward.
Now, when we're talking about lessons, we'll have a look at my team. Pay attention. So here we are. That was 96, third overall in the Stacey West League, which was outstanding. I was a little bit miffed because Fleetwood threw away a 2-goal lead, and had they won by 2 goals, that would have been enough to have nudged me over 100 points. But there is a point of discussion here that we will pick up, and I don't know if Jack Mulhall watches this or not. We'll pick it up in a second. Huddersfield let me down more than they let you down in terms of players. Anthony Evans didn't start last night. Halick went off after 18 minutes last night, as well as scoring an own goal on Saturday. So he had an absolute nightmare. Lincoln City's attacking prowess helped me because Will Amerson blocked 2 chances. One of them, I think, that was goalward bound on Saturday against us. So picking the 2 Wigan defenders and picking 3 defenders as a whole certainly worked in my favour. But it's the 2 teams at the bottom, because obviously in previous weeks, and of you guys as well, last week was a little bit different because it was a double game week, but you've picked teams that are represented in your 7 players as also represented at the bottom. I didn't do that, and those 16 points were pretty big, I think, for me. So it was a bit of a risk not doing that. And after we'd picked our teams last week, I remember thinking, I've dropped a little bit of a ball here. But no, it worked out for me. So I don't mean to bug, you know me. I'm a good winner. I do it a lot. Although don't remind me of that at pool night tomorrow
night. You beat me to it. That's tomorrow night.
So yeah, it was a good week, but it was fun because actually from the Friday night game right the way through, there was plenty of interest, and there was part of me watching Lincoln thinking, if we do concede in the last minute, please let it be Will Amerson.
That's horrible. You can't do that to your own team. You know what, though? You say it's fun. It is fun. And I can't remember what betting company it was, but they used to have the tagline in, it matters more when there's money on it. It's almost saying that you kind of pay more attention to the other games when you've got an accumulator on or something. What this has helped me do, and I've got nothing against betting, by the way. I like a flutter now and then. But I haven't really had much of a bet this year because this is kind of filling that hole. I've still got that kind of vested interest in lots and lots of other games because of this, and I haven't had to lose a fiver doing it, so that's nice.
We should have put a quid in. The loser had to put a quid in the pot every week, and then whoever won overall at the end got to take the whole pot. That would have been.
I'm happy for us to do that.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, we'll discuss that because when money comes into it, I starts to make me a little bit queasy. Right, so a new feature this week. We're going to start, not just because I'm in the top 3, but we're going to start looking at the game week as the league as well as the full league. Just for those, and bear in mind this is just the Stacey West League. We're not running through the whole Lincoln City League or anything like that. So just the Stacey West League. EFL Fantasy Josh up there at the top, 107. And for those who want to see the kind of the winning team there, again, it's that Poku, it's that Peterborough in the middle, but he picked Poku. He also picked Amerson, but captained Poku. Let down by Huddersfield again. So really, Pierre Gianni and Luke Chambers were 2 big winners for him as well. So that was the winning team. The thing is, component-wise, it's the same lines that we were on, isn't it? It's just just slightly different. So well done. I think that must be a Josh Jones. Well done, Josh. Other big things in there. There's me, 3rd. I don't know if I could draw your attention to that, but I am 3rd. Ed Harrison there in 4th. Let's have a look. John Leonard, who's I think top in the full league, coming in 10th, but lots of high scores. And you say you had a bad week. 16th out of how many are we talking? Doesn't actually say, 80 odd. So it wasn't actually a bad week at all, really, was it?
No, it's just compared to you, and that's all that matters.
That's all that matters. Let's just go down and see if we can see Ben, because it's been very unusual. There's Jacknell Hall. He's 28th. Oh dear, have you seen Ben anywhere? I haven't seen Ben anywhere.
I haven't stumbled across him just yet. No,
it does look like it was a bad week for him. Dara Tracy was doing really well. He got a 54 this week. Surely Ben is here somewhere. It's nice to see that he isn't it? We must have missed him. We must have
there
missed
he is.
him.
Look, there he is. 84, 23.
84. He's in. I've got a feeling that Charlie might not be updating his team because that's not a great week. Charlie, you need to sort yourself out really over in Gibraltar. And if you are picking your team, then you need to sort yourself out even more. So that was the overall. That was the game week 7 rather. Just to look at the overall, we'll skip past the 61st. So John Leonard's still top. He got 83, but a massive 442 points. We think that must be Josh Jones at 1 point behind, and then Callum Anderson 1 point behind again. There's not a lot in it there, is the look. Mr. Priestley 439, Jones, that's Mr. or Mrs. or Ms. Jones on a 438. So there's 4 points separate the top 5. So it's quite tight at the top there.
It's all to play for, isn't it? It's all to play for. Especially this week, as we're going to mention later, it's another week where there's 2 fixtures that count towards this week's score. So there's a potential for quite big swings here, depending on how well it goes for people. So I think, for those people that noticed that there was 3 or 4 fixtures last week where there were teams that were playing twice, there's quite a big advantage there if you notice that compared to not seeing it and in terms of the point scoring. Here, almost every club, not every club, but almost every club is playing twice in the whole EFL this week. So got lots more choice, but also a lot more potential for things to go wildly well or terribly badly.
Now, here's a conversation that some people may or may not think about having very soon. It's that captainship. So rather than double captaining somebody in EFL, you can play your captainship, and then by default, the highest scoring player automatically has captain allocated. Now, it runs out, so you only have a certain amount of time to play it, and I believe it's before January the 1st, but I may be wrong. And then you get another one in the second half of the season. But if you don't use it in the first half of the season, you lose it. So it's a use it or lose it situation. Is that something you've considered at all over the last couple of weeks?
Yes, but I haven't dared press the button. I do think it's valuable as and when you pick players from teams that have got 2 games that week. So it has to be on a 2-game week to maximise the potential of it, I think. There was a potential this week because I struggled to pick a captain this week. So maybe I should have, hindsight will be a wonderful thing, won't it? But maybe I should have done it this week. But yeah, we've got plenty of time to do it yet, but it's certainly worth keeping in the background, isn't it? Because, as you say, it needs to be used at some point. And I think you need to be quite strategic as to when it is used. So it'll be very interesting.
I clicked on it this week and then I unclicked it because I think a double game week is the best time to do it. And I think a double game week where there are multiple teams with double games, not just like 6, I think it was last week, because everybody's teams last week were really based around the same 6, and Huddersfield let a lot down. Very few people lumped on Blackpool. Everybody had the same sort of idea and sort of approach. But this week, we'll bring our teams up in a minute. I think there's only one real similarity between your team and my team this week, and it felt like it might be I want to say double captain, but a captainship week. Now, I've actually had more fun picking my team this week than I did last week because the double game week restricted you when there was only a couple of games, and it could be a real issue if a game gets rearranged towards the end of the season and one team or 2 teams rather are playing a double game week and nobody else. It's actually gonna slightly take some of the edge off the game, I think, a little bit, because you're going to almost clamour every time to go for that double pick, aren't you?
Yeah, certainly. It did limit us last week. And you know what? Last week, I put so much time and effort into research. And I've got a bit of a system now doing this a few weeks in. So the first thing I'll do is I'll go and Y-Scout and FOTMob and make a note of the kind of high-performing teams and the really poorly performing teams and players in all divisions. Just make a kind of a rough note of those. Not all my picks are just purely on stats, but I like stats to kind of back up my picks. And then from there, look at kind of outliers in mismatches in fixtures. So I did all of that, prepped all of it, made a short list of which teams realistically I might like to look for, which sort of players I might like to look for. And then I went to look at the fixtures. And it was only at that point that I realised, there's only 6 teams that are playing twice. So after doing all that work and all that prep, my pool of players and teams to pick from just shrank immediately. So yeah, I didn't have as much fun last week, but I was smug this time last week because I thought I'd found a little niche. I found a little way of maybe cheating the system a little bit. But no, everyone else saw it as well. So I wasn't as clever as I thought I was. But this week has been a lot more fun, been a lot more varied. This is probably the most fun I've had at any point this week. I know I said I really enjoyed it when I had the 1% club rule that Dean mentioned last week. I had that a couple of weeks ago. That was quite good fun just because you're trying to find those kind of, if you like, gaps in the market. But because there's so much variety this week and so many options, I feel that people's teams this week will be really, really varied. I think that made it quite fun. I really found it difficult to sit on a side this week. I had 2 or 3 players that I was kind of pretty sold on, and then the rest was a real challenge, to be honest. So for me, I'm thinking this could either go really, really very well or really, really very badly. I'm not really playing the percentages here. It's quite a high risk week, I think, for me.
Well, I wanted to go through some of the players in game week 7 who had done really well, because obviously that tends to help kind of drive your thinking a little bit, doesn't it? But I was just having a look down, and it's not particularly easy to see that on the interface. But just as I've just managed to find it now. So the best performing players last week, just as an aside for some people. So Dion Charles was the top performing player with 23 points. Bear in mind it's a double game week. Ethan Galbraith on 22. I don't know the lad's first name. Mothersill at Peterborough on 19. Poku on 19. Sam Lavelle 17. Casey at Blackpool 16. Sam Tickle, Theo Vassell 16, and then Aimson and Cipriano. So I think it's worth having a look at that probably in certain episodes again as we go through. But shall we have a look at the teams that we have picked this week?
Let's do it.
So before we go into the actual teams, formation-wise, I noticed that you have disregarded Dean's advice about defenders being the better scorers and stuck with your rigid 2-2-2 formation. And I have stuck with the only formation that I have won with in a normal non-handicapped month, the game week at the moment, which is the tried and trusted, I would call it the Mark Kennedy approach of 3 at the back, 2 defensive midfielders, and we'll stick 1 up top as a token gesture.
Yeah, I have stuck to the 2-2-2. I was more than tempted to copy you and Dean from last week and go for 3 centre backs. I found it really difficult to choose between the defenders I did pick. There was one other defender that isn't actually on either of our teams at the moment who I was really tempted by, but I was also pretty keen on playing a front 2 this week. So I don't think it lets you do a 3-1-2, does it? So I went for a 2-2-2, and here we are.
So we'll go position for position, and if we match up, we can discuss that individual player. So we're starting in goal. You've gone for the Lincoln City old boy. Now I've tried this already with Paul Farman and Alex Palmer, but you've gone for Nick Townsend.
Yeah, it wasn't because of the Lincoln link, to be honest, but it was again. This is a high risk one. So he's made the most saves in League 2. I think he's actually made the most saves out of any goalkeeper on Fantasy EFL as it stands, and that counts for something, despite the fact that Newport have actually conceded the most goals out of our second most goals in League 2. So that's high risk. But he's got 2 home fixtures, firstly coming up against Crewe and Salford. Salford are the second worst performing in terms of expected goals created. Crewe are not particularly high in that regard as well. So I'm kind of looking at this from 2 angles. If Newport continue their trend, then he's going to make quite a few saves, hopefully. But if they are able to keep out teams that aren't the sharpest at that end of the pitch, there are clean sheet potentials here as well, particularly with 2 home games. So I've kind of gone for, I'm hoping he'll score points either way, is my hope here. So that's my selection with Nick Townsend.
Now, in terms of goalkeepers for me, apart from a Will Mannion 9, I haven't really done particularly well. In fact, there's only been one other week where I've scored more than 4. So I don't have a lot of luck with goalkeepers. Even in a double game week, Jed Steer only scored me a 4. I think that you have to be not lucky, but I think it's harder to pick a goalkeeper who's in so-called good form under this scoring regime. So I've tried to just go for somebody that I think will probably not concede goals. So I've picked arguably one of the best teams from one of the best division in Leeds United. I've checked that he plays 90 minutes. I've checked that he's not likely to be dropped. So that's why I have got Mr. Meslier, I think his name is. I'm not very good with pronunciations, as people who regularly watch or listen will know. That's my thinking behind that. Now, we've both gone for Paudie O'Connor.
We have.
My thinking for this, is just purely he's Lincoln's best scoring defender. And Jack Mulhall made me feel very guilty for placing my trust last week in two players that were playing against Lincoln. So I felt this week a little bit of pressure to back Lincoln City as much as possible. So Paudie O'Connor, probably the best scoring player. We know that he won't get taken off, so he's likely to complete 90 minutes. We know if he's fit, he plays. He plays most games. He's very rarely injured, so he's kind of a bit of a banker. And also, certainly Blackpool, they attack with pace. They do get the ball down. They've been in pretty good form, so I can see him being busy. But when Lincoln's defence are busy, they're at their best. So I can see blocks, I can see tackles, and I can see, hopefully, a better overall haul than the 30 that Will Aimson got me last week.
Yeah, this could be a big one because I've obviously also picked Paudie. I was also tempted by Sean Rowan, to be honest. Okay. But I, as in selecting both of them, I was always going to pick Paudie this week. But for two reasons, really. As you mentioned, always going to be playing, most likely, unless he gets sent off. I appreciate he's had a couple of red cards, but normally he's ever present. Cambridge away is a really winnable game for Lincoln. Looking at this potential clean sheet there, and also a set piece threat. Cambridge play a similar number of long passes to Lincoln, so they're not the most direct team, but they're certainly not the least direct either. So I think there'll be a few clearances. Playing centre of the three, who tends to kind of dominate the aerial balls forward, so there'll be plenty of clearances, I think. And then against Blackpool under Steve Bruce, they've reverted to a back four, playing 4-4-2, have gone a bit more direct, get plenty of crosses in the box, and expect him to be busy against Blackpool. So we've kind of gone for similar reasoning here for Paudie. The big difference, of course, is you've decided to captain him. So if this goes as we both hope and expect it to, you'll get double the number of points than I will from Paudie O'Connor.
But this is the same that we had with Poku last week, isn't it? So
yeah.
So talk me through your next defender.
So this is hopefully a way of slightly cheating the system. So it's Hakiba Doffin from Rotherham United. Now Rotherham are playing two away games, playing away at Shrewsbury and Cambridge. So two of the worst performing teams so far this season in League One. Rotherham, of course, really underperforming as it stands, despite their underlying numbers being okay. Now, don't get me wrong. I like that they're underperforming. It's very funny that Steve Evans is struggling at the start of his Rotherham career. However, Hakiba Doffin is actually playing right of a midfield three in Steve Evans's 4-1-3-2 system as it stands. So he's actually playing in midfield. Now, defenders score points for tackles as well as clearances. And actually centre-backs don't tend to be involved in that many tackles because, I don't know, was it the great Paolo Maldini that said, if I've got to make a tackle, I've already made a mistake? So you tend to find that tackles are more prominent in midfield than they are at the back. And with Hakiba Doffin playing in midfield, I think he's going to score really highly for tackles there. So that was a little way of cheating the system. And I also think, against Shrewsbury, it's going to be quite a direct game. There's going to be quite a lot of turnovers in midfield. I think he'll get a chance there. Of course, Rotherham are a direct team themselves. So I can see a lot of turnovers. I can see him being a key player and winning the ball back regularly for Rotherham. And I can see, if things go well for Rotherham, him being on a winning side, at least in one of those two games. Even if they do continue to underperform, you'd expect them to at least pick up 3 points or so here. But to be honest, even if Rotherham don't, I still expect him to score relatively highly. So, yeah, I think this might be I don't think go terribly or really well, but deep down, I'm thinking this might be a bit of a smart one.
Okay. Well, we're already overrunning, which is obvious. Why would we not? I mean, it's 24 minutes. We're pushing the half hour. So I'll take you through my next two defender picks back to back. There is one reason and one reason only that I've picked Max Cleworth, and that's because he's been outstanding all season for Wrexham. He scored 3 goals for them already. He's the leading scorer in terms of defenders. They're playing Stevenage, and again, there was points to be had from Stevenage's kind of, Liam used to call it heavy metal approach, I think, for defenders in terms of blocks and tackles. So I'm just backing a player that has already scored points. It's not rocket science. Sometimes, Chris, you can overthink these things, and this week I've tried not to overthink it. Hence Will Aimson. Last week, Will Aimson scored me 30 points, so he keeps his place this week. It's nice and simple. Peterborough are an attacking side. They like to have the ball, but they do give you opportunities to get tackles and blocks in going forward. And he also plays against Exeter. There's no deeper thought than that gone into it. He did well last week. Josh Madger might be pissed off with me, if I'm honest, this week, because obviously he hasn't got into my side and he's scored me points the last couple of weeks. So, the reason I've kept Will Aimson in probably isn't fair on Josh, but there we go. I have done. And also it's just to show Jack I don't just bet against Lincoln. I was actually backing Wigan as a side as well. So just to prove a point. So we'll move into the midfield. You have gone for Alfie Doughty, first of all.
I have picked Alfie Doughty again for the third time, I believe. I'm determined at some point this will come good. I'm also determined to be proven that Luton at some point will come good and get the results that their performance are deserving. Their underlying numbers are positive, but their results haven't been so far. Alfie Doughty has got the highest number of expected assists in the Championship, performs well for key passes and interceptions. So I'm really hoping that he can get points in kind of both phases of the game here. Now, Luton are playing Plymouth, who have got one of the worst XGs against, so they concede a lot of high-quality chances. So you'd expect Alfie Doughty to be quite creative against them. And they're also playing against Oxford, who've had a fantastic start to the season. But on paper, you certainly would expect Luton at home to have too much in terms of just ability compared to Oxford, but that might be me really underestimating Oxford United. But for me, Luton, I've got two winnable games here. Things go well, and that they start to turn their season around and kind of start to show the form that we expect them to show, and also that the data suggests that they should be showing already. Then there's a potential that Alfie Doughty can be involved in two winning teams this week, and hopefully score points in both creativity and also interceptions as well.
And your second midfield pick?
This was tough. So another team, similar to Luton, actually, a team that I think is resurgent is Bolton. And I'm really kind of going all in on Bolton this week, which is potentially high risk. I was really tempted by Ethan Arahan here, just so you know. He was my other option. So I was actually had three Lincoln players, O'Connor, Rowan and Arahan, that I was kind of umming and ahhing between, and actually only ended up going for one of them. Now, this week, Bolton finally returned to winning ways. It were a convincing victory at Reading. Now, of course, that there is maybe an asterisk next to that due to the situation at Reading, but there'll be a huge confidence boost to Bolton. But I think what's really interesting is that Ian Evatt kind of reverted to type here, reverted back to his 3-5-2 that he trusted last season. He kind of stepped away from that earlier in the season. George Thomason is now the new captain, so I expect him to get 90 minutes. And Bolton have got two away games, at Crawley and at Northampton. So huge opportunities here for Bolton to really get some momentum in their season. Two, again, on paper, winnable games. So a player that's going to be guaranteed to play will already scores well for interceptions. Crawley give up a lot of chances to their opposition. So maybe a few key passes here and there potentially as well for Thomason. But someone who is almost guaranteed to play 90 minutes in the midfield for Bolton and potentially pick up 2 wins was my thinking here.
Very good. So in my midfield, we'll start with the non-Lincoln player, Mr. Brownhill. A game really is what Big Ron used to say. I've been playing percentages. He's been selected he's the central midfielder that's been selected by the most number of people, 16%. And usually, if you follow the herd, although you don't get the super big points, you're doing something right. I think he scored 14 points last week. In total, he's got 51. For me, just feels like a bit of a banker when they're playing, as Luton are, Oxford and Plymouth. So they're 2 games, again, where I think that he can affect play. I think that Burnley will do particularly well in those games. So it just seemed like a little bit of a no-brainer. I was considering a Millwall player, and we can discuss that in a little while, in George Saville, because again, Preston and Cardiff are 2 games that you would expect Millwall to do well in. And I thought in midfield, it's likely they're competitive games, because if we saw Burnley were playing Millwall, you'd go, well, that's a game they should win. But if you're picking, I think part of the tactic here is if you're picking defenders and midfielders, it's good to have them in games where there might actually be something in it. It might be a tight game, or they're going to see a lot more of the ball. So, it was a tough choice. That was my other pick. I picked Ethan Arahan. I backed him once before, and he got me 1 point. And I think I backed him in 2 game weeks, and he hasn't scored many points. But we know what Lincoln are like. We will change the way that we approach a game based on the opposition. So we go a little bit more direct if we're playing Stevenage, for instance, Wigan. We tried to counteract what they were doing by kind of matching them up. I think that we will have a strong performance against Cambridge, against Blackpool. I think there'll be the ball, will be on the floor a lot in and around the midfield. And I can see Ethan being heavily involved in that. My other pick may have been Tom Bayliss, because he actually did really well for me in game week 1. I mean, I got 33 points, which didn't feel great, but I think he picked me up 9 points. So he was one that I thought as well. But I am going a little bit all in on Lincoln, because they are the only team that I've picked 2 players from. But we shall see. Now, your forward line did, when I saw it after, because we pick our teams, you sent me it through, but I hadn't seen your team. I was actually a little bit jealous that I hadn't thought of doing it as well. And obviously, you've backed Bolton quite heavily, but talk us through those 2 last players.
Yeah, so I've captained Dion Charles, who obviously scored, I think, a hat-trick last week against Reading. That wasn't really my thinking. My thinking was that he's playing back with a partner now in the front 2 winnable games in Crawley and Northampton, particularly Crawley, a team that offers the opposition chances. And I just think there's a huge mismatch in terms of just overall talent level between Bolton and Northampton. And as mentioned, I really feel Bolton we will see them get back towards kind of where they should be and where we expect them to be. That win against Reading is going to be a huge confidence boost for them. But it coincides with the fact that there was a change in shape. There has been some change at Bolton, and that had an immediate impact on the pitch. Dion Charles already had a high expected goals score for League One before his haul last weekend. So I'm really backing him to get plenty of chances here against 2 teams that Bolton will go into these fixtures expecting to win. So he's my first one. And I've also gone for Duncan Watmore. Now you mentioned Millwall. Millwall was a team I was really tempted to back here. Playing Preston at home. Millwall are brilliant at home. And a quite poor Cardiff away. Now there's always a question mark, because would there be a potential new manager bounce at Cardiff? They've just sacked Bullet this week, but they are poor. They're really quite poor at both ends of the pitch. Duncan Watmore performs really, really well for goals and assists, but also expected goals and expected assists so far this season for Millwall. Seems to be involved in everything they do at the top end of the pitch. Millwall also perform really well for touches in the box. So they do get the ball in the mixer regularly, but they do tend to kind of have a bit of possession in there. So I'm hoping Duncan Watmore can bag another goal or 2 and tends to play the majority of minutes for them. So yeah, that's the reason why I was really wanted to go for a front 2 this week, which probably made me pick my 2-2-2 shape. But again, probably 2 high risk picks depending on how you look at this. But as I said at the top of the show, for me, I think this can go either really, really very well or really quite badly. Now, I don't think this is going to be a kind of middling week. It'll go 1 or 2 ways for me. But that's my front 2.
Well, I have once again backed Notts County. Now, I've been a Jonah for Notts County because they're 4th in the division. Every time I don't pick one of their players, they do really well. And every time I pick one of their players, they do particularly badly. So I think in game week 4, I had Dan Crowley, and he got 2 points. In game week 5, I had Jody Jones captained, and he didn't even play. So I've been a little bit of a bad omen for Notts County. Morecambe and Carlisle are 2 really, really winnable games. Now, bear in mind, I bet against Morecambe this weekend with Fleetwood, and they beat them 2-0. I think Notts County could get promoted this season. I still think Jody Jones is a cut above that division. I think when I was looking, he's got something like 4 goals and 3 assists, or vice versa. So he's among the goals and assists. I'm captaining defenders because it worked really well for me last week. But like with Dion Charles, I see plenty of opportunity for Jody Jones. And that is why when we move on to teams, Last week, I said I wasn't going to back the same team and the same player, and I didn't want to do it this week. But I'm sorry, Notts County, Morecambe, and Carlisle. That just feels too tasty for me. I'm afraid that. So hence Notts County, and then Birmingham. Probably I could have backed a lot better teams. Burnley or Luton, for instance, would have been better backed. I can't see anybody beating Birmingham City. I can't see Peterborough doing it. I don't think Peterborough have got enough at the back to keep them out. Huddersfield are on an appalling run of form. So I've taken a bit of a risk, and there's no reward. You don't get anything extra for picking for picking a team that don't look like they've got the easiest 2 games. But I just think Birmingham are a little bit of a banker. 2 games in a week, they are going to pick up, in my opinion, a minimum of 4 points there. And I actually think it's challenging to pick a team that are going to win 2 games in a week, because the leagues are also very, very tight. There aren't really any whipping boys. If you had to pick a team to win 2 weeks in a row and you didn't know who they were playing, you would always pick Birmingham. So there we go. Birmingham City for me.
Yeah, I was really tempted to pick Jay Stansfield for that reason, because I have a feeling he may end up being like the Erling Haaland of the Premier League fantasy game, because he almost scores every single week. So if you don't have him in your team, you're automatically at a disadvantage. I think at some point Jay Stansfield might end up being that in League One, and Birmingham City may well be that kind of dead cert. I'm also really conscious you can only pick a team 5 times. And I'm pretty sure that as the season progresses, Birmingham are only going to get better and better. But they've really kind of already gone up a notch compared to the first 2 or 3 weeks of the season. And yeah, I just thought of all the game weeks, they're playing 2 decent sides. There's probably going to be another couple of weeks where there'll be a 2-game week where they play 2 teams that you'd expect them to win. More so, I agree with you. I expect them to win every game, to be honest, but I didn't go for them for that reason. 2 teams I've gone for, as mentioned before, Bolton. I really expect to see a resurgent Bolton this game week, playing away at Crawley and away at Northampton. Now, of course, you get 2 extra points for an away win compared to a home win. So I was conscious of trying to pick teams that played 2 away games or had 2 winnable away games. So I've gone for Bolton for that reason. And as mentioned before, I'm really kind of backing Bolton this week. But I've kind of gone for a mix and match approach this week, because one week I mixed everything up. One week I basically just selected teams at the bottom that were linked directly to the players I had selected. This time I've done a bit of both. I've got 2 Bolton players and Bolton selected, but I've also selected Bradford City without selecting a Bradford player. Reason or 2 for this really is Andy Cook was a potential player to select, but he does play 90 minutes regularly, but I doubt he plays 90 minutes in 2 games in a week. Potential threats, and there wasn't really any other really high performing Bradford players, but I thought it was 2 really winnable away games for a really solid and robust Bradford City side playing away at Harrogate and Morecambe, 2 teams who give up a lot of chances. So again, backing myself here, or backing teams with away victories, and yeah, I was really conscious of trying to pick teams that had 2 away games that were winnable. So we shall see how it goes.
It's fine margins, isn't it? You're talking an extra 2 points for an away win. So we're thinking that this week could be so close that we need the extra 2 points to steal that in. And I'm beginning to regret Birmingham now, because I haven't even picked a banker. You know what I mean? Peterborough are expected to be competitive against them. So last week we said, how confident did we feel? This week, on a scale of 1 to 10, how confident do you feel that you're going to go back to 4-2?
Well, every time I've said I felt confident, I've lost, and every time I was a bit concerned, I haven't. So I'm going to say 5 out of 10. Honestly, it could go either way. I really can't call this one. I really can't. I'm concerned that we've both got O'Connor and you've captained him and I haven't. That's a real concern for me, to be honest.
But then when I haven't captained players like Jody Jones in the past, and Ben, who does relatively well on this, I've always felt like I've trying to be edgy by doing the defender and not the striker. The thing is, if the striker gets the goals, you're laughing. You only have to look at Poku and how well he did this weekend. You know, if I'd captained him rather than the defender, then I would have been flying. So it may be a miscalculation on my part to captain Paudie O'Connor, but if he pops up with a goal, it will absolutely be justified, and there is always a potential for that. So we shall see. Apologies for only figuring out that I could do that kind of sharing halfway through instead, so you could have seen our faces.
So we'll do that from now on every week, shall we?
Yep. So our 30-minute show has now gone to 40 minutes. We will try harder next time to keep it down to 30 minutes.
It's my fault. Sorry.
Yeah, it is, because you put a lot more thought into it than me going in and going, right, who did well last week? We'll pick him. But does it pay off? Will it pay off? If we get to 3-3, we are going to start introducing some new angles to our picking. So we may both do a 1% club. We may do it so that we can only pick League One teams, League Two teams, Championship teams. We may do it so we can only pick one player per team, so that every player's got to be from a different team. We may do all manner of different things to try and shake it up. Remember, if you are watching this and you do want to come on the show, give us a shout. If you're watching it and you enjoy it, and you're one of the 109 that watched it last week, which was phenomenal, please do give us a thumb up and a comment and all that, because it helps us on the algorithms. If you think of any features you'd like us to put in, so it's not just us talking about our teams, let us know and we will endeavour to do that. But in the meantime, I think we just need to hand over to the theme tune. So before we do, and obviously it'll tell you that I won this week, all I can say is up the with Call and I.
Up substandard Liège, we were very